Okay. If you're not really into chemistry, then it's possible you could use some help learning about the periodic table. And if you are really into chemistry, then maybe you need help learning how to make friends. Either way, you've come to the right place. I like to think of the periodic table as a chart of personality types that atoms can have. And by personality, I mean the way they like to share, or not share, their electrons. Whether or not atoms will bond with each other, and the kind of bond they're going to make, it's all based on what each one decides to do with its electrons. And if you watch humans long enough, you'll notice that we have electrons too, but we normally call them other things like a sense of humor, or emotions, or talents, or 6-season box set of the Powerpuff Girls, or even just our time. In this video, I'm going to call them what they really are. People electrons. When two or more people decide to share their people electrons with each other, we call that very special bond a friendship. Hey, want to come take a look at my people electrons? Yeah, hi, 911? Yeah, he got out again. So, the better you know how different kinds of atoms like to share their electrons, the better you're going to be at chemistry. And the better you know how different kinds of people like to share their people electrons, the better you're going to be at making friends. What I think is really interesting is, turns out atoms and people have kind of the same personalities. Check this mess. The first kind of atoms in the periodic table are what I'm going to call the electropositive elements. Electropositive means they're positive, they want to get rid of a few electrons, and they'll give them to just about anyone who will take them. That means normally these elements react really strongly, even to simple stuff like water. Hey, cesium. Oh, hey, oxygen. Wait, who the heck is this? Oh, this is hydrogen, and hydrogen. I thought we were supposed to eat lunch together. I was supposed to sit next to you! You know what? No. I'm out. Electropositive people are also really excited to give up their people electrons. This kind of person often likes to talk a lot, and they're very good at trusting other people. Sometimes they can be a little dramatic, but that just makes them more exciting to be around. The second personality in the periodic table is the transition metals. In most cases, these elements don't care that much about how they share electrons. They're usually happy just to make bonds, and they're not too picky about how many electrons it involves. Hey, my little brother was asking if he could play with us. Lame, right? Anyway, I told him you'd probably hate that. Actually, I really don't care. Woohoo! But just because they're flexible doesn't mean that these guys make weak bonds. These metals are pretty strong. And the human version of a transition metal is pretty much up for whatever. They might not be that decisive, but it doesn't mean they're not interested in you or being your friend. In fact, because they're so flexible, it's pretty easy for them to befriend a lot of different kinds of people. Just, don't ask them to pick a place to eat. Next, you got the electronegative elements. These guys aren't always looking for a lot of bonds. Sometimes they're happy with just one really good one. Some of the most electronegative atoms like to pair up in twos, and then these pairs are so happy together that they don't really interact with other pairs that much, so they end up being gases. It's really nice to finally have a friend I can just, hang out with. You're really chill. I'm so chill. Anyway, we should make a blood pact to cut ourselves off from other relationships. What? Electronegative people love to get electrons from other people, but it might be difficult for them to give out their own electrons unless they find someone they can really relate to. They're great listeners, and they might prefer not to be out in big groups. Because they're such good listeners, you might be surprised how good of friends they can be with electropositive people. Okay, all the way over on the right are some of the coolest atoms out there. These are the noble gases. They don't really share electrons. They're pretty much perfect on their own, and most of the time they don't bond with anything else.
Would you want to go out sometime?
And risk polluting the royal bloodline? No.
You could have just said...
Thank you.
You could have...
I have met some people like this who just can't sing. Who don't really let people close to them. Most of the time, I think they're just waiting for the right time to share their people electrons. No matter what, it doesn't hurt to try being their friend. It might take a lot of work and patience, but at the end of the day, you could be friends with royalty. And if you do figure out how to get them to give up a few electrons, things can get lit.
pretty quickly. That's funny because neon, when it's ionized. Anyway, whatever. On to the lanthanides. The lanthanides are big fat metal elements that we usually forget about. These guys don't fit very nicely into the periodic table. Normally they would go here, but that would make the table really long and kind of ugly. Anyway, a lot of these elements are pretty rare, but when they form bonds with the right elements, they can do some pretty cool stuff, like make lasers or really strong magnets or superconductors.
Wow, he's absolutely amazing. Dare I say super.
Wait. Oh my, please tell me I'm not supposed to be a superconductor? This was your idea for a cutscene. Look, I'm sorry, it's late in the video anyway, nobody's gonna watch this far. Just roll with it. It turns out that a lot of the coolest, most interesting friends you could ever find are hiding somewhere because they don't fit in very nicely with everyone else. But hey, they can help you make lasers, so befriend them before your enemies do. These bad Johnnies below the lanthanides are called actinides. All of them are radioactive, which makes bonding with them a little tricky. I'm afraid my staggering intellect makes me at times unapproachable. Nope, dude, it's your BO. Take a shower, you hippie. Human beings who are radioactive are also pretty tough to make friends with, and in my opinion, it's actually an important thing to know. There are some people you're just not going to be friends with. If you're like me, that drives you crazy, but whatever. I mean, you could still be nice to them, or see the section about lasers earlier. Alright, to finish it off, there are a few atoms that are actually only stable for really short amounts of time in a lab. For that reason, it doesn't really make much sense to talk about how they interact with other atoms, and they don't really contribute anything to our everyday lives. Yes, there are people like that. Only stable for small amounts of time in a lab, they don't interact with anyone else, and they don't contribute anything to society. I'm not going to say who they are, but they're grad students. Well, there you have it. Obviously, there are a lot of exceptions to these super broad categories with atoms and with people. These are just some fun rules of thumb that have helped me get started making friends and doing chemistry. The rest, you just kind of learn as you go. By the way, this was my first stab at animating, and I had a ton of fun with it. I'm planning to upload more videos soon, but if you didn't know, I also drew a bunch of comics. You can read those if you get bored while you wait.